Hello, and welcome to Weird Technology by Jared, starring me, Jared. And today I will be showing you how to build a modular all-in-one gaming computer using, for the most part, off-the-shelf components. So what we have here is the mono all-in-one chassis from Quiet PC. The thing that makes this interesting is, unlike most all-in-ones, the components are fully modular. It takes a standard mini ITX motherboard, and most smaller size graphics cards will fit fine in this case, allowing you to have full desktop grade gaming experience on something completely compact that will fit on your desk without having to have a big bulky tower underneath. Well, can you really have an optimal gaming experience on an all-in-one though? I mean, sure, it looks nice. Well, let's open it up and let's find out. When you're ready to build, you start by taking the 4 screws off that holds the stand onto the monitor. Without the stand in place, the computer has to remain on its screen, which makes testing a little bit difficult to say the least. Once you have that out of the way, proceed to remove the 6 screws around the perimeter of the monitor. A few of the screws are quite long, and multiple times I've thought they were loose, but I did have to revisit them and give them the old second chance. So what you see here is the hard drive / disk drive bay. Now this can hold either a single 3.5-inch drive, two 2.5-inch drives if you're using a dual mounting system, or a single 2.5-inch drive and a slimline optical drive for those of you who still burn DVDs or have older software that needs to be installed off a disk. What you have here is the PCI mounting bracket for a graphics card. Most mini ITX form factor graphics cards will fit on here, as well as any other expansion cards that does not exceed the length up to this screw. What you have here is the empty space for the power supply. Now, due to size constrictions, you have to use a non-modular power supply with this case, as modular and semi-modular power supplies are just slightly longer and exceed the little framework that the developers of this case allocated for the power supply. And what you see right here is the little opening space for the motherboard with the AIO shield going here. Now, the actual circuitry that connects the display to the motherboard is a DVI cable and a standard 3.5mm jack, which are routed through a little slot that you can see here on the exterior case. They can either plug into the graphics card or to the integrated graphics on the motherboard through the slot here. Most of your other cables, such as the power source for the internal speakers on the monitor and the webcam, as well as your standard motherboard input switches, will be routed underneath the motherboard and connect to their final destinations up here on the top. Alright, now that I've kind of shown you around, let's take a tour of what we're actually going to put in this sucker. Alright, first off, the real star of the show here. This is the Diamond Radeon R9 Nano graphics card. It's the perfect size to be compatible with our device here, and it was a steal at Micro Center for only $325. This is going to have plenty of power for the type of gaming this machine's going to be doing, and the form factor that's just perfect for our size. Next here, we have ourselves an ASRock H110M Mini ITX motherboard with built-in AC Wi-Fi. In it, we have 16 gigabytes of Ballistics DDR4 RAM And we are also rocking an i5 6600K processor. You might ask yourselves, why am I buying a K processor if I have a motherboard that does not support overclocking? Well, it's just a little bit of future-proofing. I don't plan on keeping this configuration forever. If I ever did get a overclocking motherboard, it'd be nice to be able to have a CPU that was already compatible with it. Connected to this is a Noctua low-profile CPU cooler. Performance on these are really quite good, and it's just the perfect size to fit in this computer case, since this is restricted to low-profile CPU coolers. And I think it looks pretty cool as well. And lastly, to power this whole configuration, we have ourselves an 80 plus 600 watt power supply from EVGA. As I mentioned before, this case only supports non-modular power supplies. When you're building in this kind of space, cable management is key. I've already measured some of my cables and zip tied accordingly. I'm hoping this will have all the appropriate lengths I need to connect everything up. With that said, let's slap everything in, and we'll see what kind of performance this thing can output. Alright, now for the most part, building in this case is a lot like building in any other PC that you've worked in before. First things first, you snap the AIO shield into place. And simply drop the motherboard in. It's simply a matter after that of screwing in 4 screws and making sure that the motherboard cables are flat underneath the motherboard. The connection for the speakers goes into the USB 2 header here. Now, this does not actually have USB 2 ports anywhere on the actual chassis. The header is merely here in order to power the speaker systems built into the computer. Other than that, it has no actual USB functionality whatsoever. Next, the real powerhouse behind this whole setup, let's install the graphics card. Really no trick to it. It will go in just like any other graphics card you have ever installed. Just pops right in. Make sure it's locked into place. And just run some screws in right here to hold it into place. The power supply is mounted with the fan facing upwards and the switch and the power connector pointing out towards the bottom. Included with the mono chassis is this Molex adapter, which is used to power the logic board for the onboard speakers, as well as the actual display itself. For the hard drive, I've went with a 480 gigabyte SanDisk SSD, mounted on a Corsair twin mounter. The plan is to add a terabyte mechanical hard drive on top of this at a later date, but for now I just wanted to get it up and running. The case comes with 2 metal sleds which lock into grooves here at the top. As you can see, there is the hard drive mounted in its correct position. Now, I did lose one of the screws for connecting the sleds to the case, but as many veteran PC builders would tell you, there's always redundant screws anyway. You don't truly need as much as you started with. At least that's what I'm hoping. With the PC mostly assembled at this point, take the 3.5mm cable for the speakers and the DVI port and route them to their destination. Of course, I forget that the R9 Nano does not have a DVI port. One moment. Alright, one trip to Best Buy later and the purchase of a HDMI to DVI adapter, and we are ready to continue with the build. Alright, now that we're ready to put the back plate on, it should be cable managed well enough that it should close. The thing to keep in mind is, when you are connecting the DVI cable and the HDMI and the 3.5mm cable, you have to line them up with this divot. That's what allows them to go from the inside of the case to their appropriate connections on the outside. Obviously, with an off-the-shelf all-in-one, these are connected internally, but with this type of configuration, this is really the best we can hope for. With the back plate on, here come the Wi-Fi antennas. This gives us our own AC Wi-Fi. I specifically sought out a board with built-in Wi-Fi. As being a mini ITX board, there's no way to put in a dedicated Wi-Fi card. Alright, here's our final results, folks. Our computer is complete. You look at this side here. You'll see we have our graphics card input and outputs right here at the top, where we have our HDMI to DVI adapter, as well as 4 DisplayPort ports. Gives us plenty of I/O options if we want to expand with a second monitor setup in the future. And here we can see the finished product. As you can see, the R9 Nano is more than capable of driving both the internal display of the all-in-one and the secondary display of the 4K monitor I've plugged into it. So, I've been using this computer setup for about 2 weeks now, and here's some of the things I've learned. Well, I shouldn't shave. I look childish and completely weird, and I just shouldn't do it. It's more importantly, and more topical, the webcam on this is awful. It's fuzzy and it's out of focus and it doesn't compensate for lighting quite well. Also, it is for some reason located at the bottom of the screen, so it looks like I'm distracted by a hugely grotesque fly on the wall, and not the actual person I'm talking to should I be voice chatting. So you might be wondering how the thermals in a system like this might perform. Quite well, actually, despite the fact there is no case fans on it, and not really airflow per se of any sort on it. The parts are close enough to the exterior of the case. The fan from the graphics card and the CPU cooler just vents directly to the exterior. On max settings, reaching around 100 to 125 frames per second on Overwatch, the card never went above 75 degrees, and the CPU tend to hover around 35. I'm quite satisfied with the performance I'm getting out of this, and I look forward to using this as my main gaming rig for a good while now. Now, you might ask yourself, is building in a case like this worth it? I would say no. I mostly did it just because it seemed like a fun little project. But the limited amount of parts you're allowed to use, such as non-modular power supplies, low-profile CPU coolers, shorter length graphics cards, you're just far too limited for the parts you're going to be using and don't have nearly the freedom that building in a traditional tower will offer. Not saying it isn't fun, though, and if you're the kind of person who likes to have unusual and uncommon PCs, this case is available in 21, 25, and 27-inch varieties, so you can really build a rig that will suit whatever sort of style you want to rock. More power to you. Alright guys, thanks for watching my first of hopefully many videos to come. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you didn't like what you saw, I'm a man, I can take it. Feel free to leave any constructive criticism you think would be helpful. Well, this is Jared with Weird Tech, signing off, and I hope to see you next time.